Hi there. Thanks for the presentation, though. It's very good. Three questions. One is, has it happened or could it happen that a client could sue a design team if they don't implement BIM and the client finds out halfway through a job there could be better practice undertaken in the process? Anyone aware of that?
I'm not aware of that. I suppose that's why the designers have PI. So, you know, everyone holds PI and they feel that the team aren't pulling away and acting professionally. Then I suppose it's that issue. I haven't seen that happen then.
I think just in relation to that, if you want to work in a BIM world, to notify your insurers, and it's important to recognise.
Yeah, I'm talking about if it hasn't happened, and retrospectively they discovered there's a better process to do it.
Yeah.
On the off chance it might happen. Okay. Second question, if you're implementing BIM a project, how far ahead should you look? Like, does it add up to the pre-design timeline? I know you'd probably accelerate the job later on. Do you need to allow an extra few months on a project to implement at a certain stage?
I would say ideally yes. You want to try and resolve as many of the design issues early on, in the virtual world. So
in general, what are you adding, like timeline-wise? Is there percentages generally, or?
I'm not sure there's a metric. The two things I would say is one is BIM is a more efficient way of working. So like it shouldn't take you longer to produce information because you're not producing it 5 or 6 times. In a traditional method, you're producing separate plans, separate sections, separate elevations, separate details, separate schedules. You're producing the same information over and over again. Whereas with BIM, you're doing it once. So it's more efficient, but at the same time, traditionally we would push a lot of decisions to much later in a project.
Say to get the planning stage, where you can submit plans to a council.
There's no extra time.
Yeah, if the team was competent, there wouldn't be extra time. But if it's their first BIM project, I would say it's probably about 25% of a loss in productivity.
The learning curve.
For the learning curve. So if you took the first sort of 3 months, we find generally with people we train and support is that there's a kind of 3-month learning period where they're kind of getting up to speed and learning how to use software, etc. So you just need to account for that 25% drop in productivity, either by adding resources. So if you normally were going to have 3 people, add 4, use 4 people. So you don't have to have an actual loss in time. You have to add productivity or extend the time.
I think the key thing there is competencies and process, having protocols in place. So if they're not in place, it will take much longer.
Yeah.
We're also finding that, yes, there's more work being done up front in the design phase, which is taking longer, but by doing that, it's reducing risk, and particularly during the construction phase, and that therefore time during the construction phase has been slightly shortened. So overall, the time period has been the same, but more time's been done up front. I don't know what your experience is, Michael, of that.
Just like it's very interesting, a very interesting question, and I think the reason there's more time been spent up front is because BIM is very unforgiving. It's very obvious when designs aren't developed, to everybody on the team. It's kind of like, oh my God, what's happening in this room? Whereas in a traditional delivery, it's kind of hard to see problems. So I don't know if that's, I don't think that's a retrospective realignment of the industry. I think it's just BIM playing a cruel trick, which is that it's very obvious. Yeah, well, it should have always been up front. It's just harder to see it when you're not doing BIM. But it's one of the biggest issues we would face is, you can really see where problems exist and you really drive people to get them sorted out. But really and honestly, these problems should be sorted out before you're delivering to that stage anyway. So, it's challenging.
Thanks. That's it. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Any more questions? Must be more questions. There has to be lots of questions. Okay, there's one here.
My question is mainly to Michael there. How do you deal the process of engaging the supply chain principally to the subcontractors. You mentioned earlier that you provide training for an assisted cost to yourself. And do you find that your tender prices are becoming uncompetitive as a result in dealing with the BIM process, especially in Ireland?
A good question. It is challenging. We obviously push BIM really, really hard in BAM, so I think we fully expected to encounter that challenge. We knew we would. And yes, we are providing training internally. A lot of our staff are accredited trainers. Part of their role, as well as being, information managers and BIM coordinators and all that, is to go and sit and train and assist. We do at times have to turn to professional services such as ArcDocs to assist us with that process, because we are very conscious of the fact that the supply chain it's in its infancy in terms of BIM, and we work with them. We spend a lot of time with them. We go out to their factories. We try and understand why they're not maybe getting there. A lot of the times the reasons are very, very legitimate, that their entire factory is built around a particular system and they have a lot of heavy lifting to do to try and make it work with another product, this type of stuff. So we can't just say to them, oh, sure, use Revit or use this or use that. It just doesn't work for them. So we have to engage early with them, but that's why we ask our suppliers through the assessment to be as honest as they can. The worst thing for us is when somebody gives us that answer, yeah, we can do BIM, and you find out 12 weeks later that it's a complete disaster, and you need to step in then and try and clean the mess up. So if you know from the start that they're not there, you can work with it. I mean, the benefits are huge for us in terms of reducing cost issues on site anyway, so there is a balance to be struck. I mean, if you are looking at spending multiples of thousands of euros to try and get somebody to a point, if you don't feel you're going to lose that on the job, why would you do it? You need to kind of look at it, but we spend a lot of our time developing plans of actions to assist our subcontractors delivering, and we're very conscious where we are and cognizant of it. They don't get berated for it, and that's part of our plan. That's part of our delivery to keep our subcontract costs down. We say we will assist heavily. It's a real journey for them. So it's like, come on, let's go and do this together. We'll assist you. You learn from us. Hopefully, we'll all win from it. So. I wouldn't use a word like IPD, but it's in some ways it's not a million miles away from looking towards that, where we're trying to have and maintain relationships with these people. But it's tough, as I'm sure you know yourself, Brian. It's tough, and maybe 10 years. It might take 10 years until we get to a point where it's a huge challenge. You're trying to do BIM, but you kind of need people. We're very reliant on people around us. We're a contracting organisation. We don't do a lot of design, development or subcontract works. We rely on professional services to do that for us, so it is a huge challenge, absolutely.
I think just to add from a designer point of view, in relation to the skills that people need to work at level 2 BIM in particular, we've heard about level 2, lots of companies provide a number of CPD days, whether it's 4, 5, 10 or whatever. That won't be enough in relation to the skills people need. And what we found from our experience is, companies being willing and able to pay for certification or pay for training, but also the employees themselves getting on board and, coming in the evenings for classes that were organised outside of normal working hours. So it is hard for companies to, who sell time or expertise, to make all this time available for training. So getting employees involved and getting them coming in the evenings, and they want to do that too because they see that there's benefits there for them in the long term. So I think that's important.
I think you've also kind of got to remember is that BIM is very new to everybody, and so it's trying to create that kind of holistic environment where we're sharing our experiences and knowledge. And our team is multidisciplinary. We have people from a design background who now act as our BIM project managers. And so they understand the software, and so in the meetings, in the environments where we feel that one of the designers maybe in particular is having a few problems, then we use our skills to be able to advise them that actually it's not going to take you 50 days to correct that, there's a free plugin or something like that, and it's sharing that knowledge and experience and providing that support, because you're going to work with subcontractors and smaller businesses who you know, I'm sure, Michael, you work with subcontractors where they're brilliant. You know,
Yeah.
their delivery is brilliant, they're efficient on site, you have a great relationship. But in terms of their technology, that's just not the way,
Yeah.
you know, Bob Smith and his son, who are fantastic partitioners, really have a business.
Yeah.
So it's learning how to provide that support and fill those gaps where necessary. And I think in the BIM environment, I think we've particularly found probably over recent years on the kind of BIM circuit in it, you know, teams, that people do share that experience, and we might not be able to do the full training, but we can send people in the right direction and provide that advice and guidance.
Yeah, totally agree.
I might just add that, if you haven't implemented BIM as a company, like the easiest way to do it is do it when it's not a requirement. You know, just pick a project or pick an element of work and get into it where you're not under pressure. The worst place to be is
Under pressure.
when you're appointed to a project and you expect to be on site in 2 weeks' time, and you've never done this.
Pilot projects are key.
And you've lied to the contractor.
Yeah.
To say yes, of course you did.
That never
You
Yeah.
have Heisenberg looking at
So I would say that start straight away. What I would also suggest is learn on a project. You know, I mean, people are busy, so it's no good saying to your staff, look, we'll just do a little thing on the side. You know, they haven't got time. Just pick something real and develop the information for that element
and if you need
of the
help,
project.
get it.
And if you need help, get it. But just get started, because when the tender comes out and there's a BIM requirement, in my opinion, that's too late. It's far too late. And what I think what contractors can do is start engaging with your supply chain now. Like send them, educate them, send them the BIM capability assessments, and say, look, BIM's coming. Maybe it's not the next project, or it might be 2 projects, but look at the capability assessment, see how you would answer that, see where you're lacking. Start thinking about developing your skills, because for the next tender, we might ask you to fill out that form, and you need to be ready to fill out that form. So it's an educational process.
Okay, there's one over here, I think.
Question perhaps for Michael or Brian at the table. How are you guys managing accurate execution on site? I mean, we can have a wonderfully coordinated model, and then we can get onto a construction site and we can run into many obstacles. How are you guys managing and
Here comes a plug for Autodesk. We are only within the last 3.5, 4 months we're using point layout through our 360 system now. So prior to that, it was actually quite challenging. Like scanning, it's expensive, it's not cheap. So verification is difficult. So what point layout allows us to do now is through our iPads, all of our operatives on sites now on a BIM job have an iPad which they've got BIM 360 Glue, they've got BIM 360 Field, and they now have point layout with 360. So that actually connects directly with the robotic total station now. So they can actually capture as constructed points directly onto their iPad, and they simply sync the iPad, and those points just manifest themselves in our cloud model, which is superb. And I mean, Autodesk are now starting to focus quite heavily on construction delivery. I've been with BAM maybe 26 months now at this point, and it's actually quite interesting to see how Autodesk are turning their targets towards construction delivery, because it was actually quite challenging 2 years ago, as you know yourself, Paul, even from the project we worked on there, to bring it to the field is really, really hard. And you have got guys and girls who are kind of like, well, what good is this to me? I can't be walking back to the office to look at it. I can't take it out there. But point layout is now allowing us to generate points for setting out, publish it to the cloud. You simply sync it up. It arrives on their iPad. They can set it out in the field without having to go back to a cabin. They can then capture the as-built points, and it gets sent back up for verification. So some very interesting. That product's in its infancy, but I'd say within 2 years it's going to be an incredible product, and I'd highly recommend people who are looking at that they look towards that particular product, because it solved a huge amount of problems for us. Because previous to that it was capture the point in the total station, get it out to CSV, get it into a product, upload it, check it. It was all a bit of a drama. So that whole KISS principle is now kicking in with this product. It's easy for people to use it, which is meaning they do use it. So currently that's how we're dealing with it.
I think it's worth noting there that point cloud verification of our models is a requirement. If you look at section 10.2 of PAS 1192, it's in there as a requirement to verify our models, either during or handover of a project. So just to look at that.
To be honest, the direction of my question was how do we manage it as part of the process rather than find it as a problem and at the end is
So,
more important.
yeah, and again, but the word is process, isn't it? Like it's part of the contractual engagement we might have with a subcontractor. It's beholden on us to build that into their subcontract engagement that our quantity surveyors are kind of saying, well, all right, so it has passed the verification process, you get paid, on you go, or please go again. But ideally we want to be in a world, and what's nice about this product now is it's live, so it's more observations than verification at the end. So as installs are recurring, we can check it. So you're not saying to me, see all of that tray you installed over the last week, take it all out. It's, guys, before you actually drill that, can you please just shift it across because there's going to be a soil vent pipe there or a solid waste pipe or whatever. So that's what we're looking at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
I think over on the left here, there's...
Sorry.
Just to add a comment and bring it back to the EIR, I think it's important that that kind of stuff is in the employer's information requirement, like setting out, on site from the model, verification through scanning, etc. Because if you have two contractors tendering, one contractor doesn't know about them, won't include for any of that. And their price might be the lowest because they haven't included for that, but it's not going to happen on site. Whereas if you have it in, everybody's tendering on a level playing field.
True.
Yeah, morning. I'm looking at it from the point of view of a client. I've seen the BIM on site, and it's been great for avoiding the fights that used to happen between the architect and the engineer. All the anti-collisions are sorted out. But as a client, I can't see my anesthetic pendants, I can't see my theatre lights, I can't see some of those other objects around that might cause collisions in airflows or electrics in the right place. What are your plans for putting objects into some of these BIM models so that I can make better use of it?
Yeah, well, I think that is the point.
They should be there.
Everything should be there, and and the reason it's not there is because nobody asked. As a client, you didn't ask at the beginning that somebody puts it in, and that's I think the point of the EIR is that if that's what you want as a client, then that's what you should be asking for, and people should be responding to that.
So in relation to that,
Sorry,
is it
I'm
possible
okay
to
to
eliminate
have
single line drawings?
Sorry?
For electrical, single line drawings for electrical, can you eliminate the requirement of BIM? Has anyone experienced that?
Well, the drawing should be derived from the model, so the light should be in the model.
And say the wiring and whatever.
Well, the software does the wiring.
That's capable, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure, thanks.
So your drawings are coming from your model environment as opposed to producing them.
Now, it's more difficult for somebody to just be producing single line drawings. But
It's possible through the objects.
But it's more difficult for them, and if you haven't made that a requirement, they're going to be looking at the job and saying, well, I just allowed them doing some single line drawings, now you want me to go model all the lights and switches and whatever. I'm not going to do that.
I think you've got to decide what level of detail needs to go in the model, which is going to drive value. Because there's no point in putting lots and lots of things in the model if it's not going to be used or utilised. And that's where the EIR and the model production delivery table within that document that I referred to when looking at level of detail is so important to identify what level of information is required, because there's no point in putting too little or too much. And that's where the EIR is so important.
Just to say that one of the things we tried to get is the information, but some of the big suppliers of Category 1 aren't BIM converts yet. So that's a message that needs to be got out there so that the like of Brian can get all the information he needs to populate the BIM model.
Can I say, just even in relation to that, unfortunately we do and will continue to live in a world where all suppliers won't provide us with model information. There are other means and ways as well, but I would reinforce what Ralph and Anna are saying. This is part of, you're probably suffering now because it wasn't clear from the start. Maybe you didn't even realise you needed to ask. To be fair, you would assume you're going to a professional service, they're probably going to do it, but I think as we learn, we're now starting to see that we need to spell everything out. Like I personally have worked in environments where literally everything was spelled out, and I mean literally painfully everything, and you weren't let away with jack unless it was there. And I've worked in environments where it's kind of like, well, off you go, you know, let's see what happens. And I know which environment worked better and delivered well and delivered on time and on budget. It was the first one, it wasn't the second one, you know, so these are all lessons we learn.
Okay, we have one over here. Yeah, you go first.
I've just a question for Anna. In terms of successfully delivering BIM projects in the UK, are there particular procurement routes or tendering strategies that you use or that you've seen are more successful than others?
No, we've worked in both traditional and D&B procurement routes and found that both of them work. It just is procurement routes obviously being very dictated by client time, etc. But BIM has been able to work in both of those environments as long as the EIR, the BIM execution plan, are aligned to that. So, for example, if the contractor is therefore going to take on board the design and carry on the design development, or whether that stays on the client side during the construction phase, as long as that's acknowledged in the BIM execution plan and in the initial EIR document, then we've not seen any problems with that.
And would that be on a single or two-stage?
You can work on both. Again, there was discussions, I was involved in a working group which looked at whether BIM was going to actually change our procurement routes, whether there was going to be more of a BIM-specific procurement route, and that hasn't really evolved, and I don't know what anyone else's experience is, but it can fit in. Our big problem, my main problem is with our team, is that when a client comes to us and says, we would really like Team T to implement the BIM strategy, etc. Don't worry, everyone's appointed, and that's when I go, oh no, because of the issues with scopes of service. That's my biggest headache, where we're trying to implement BIM retrospectively. It's not impossible, but it can be hard work. But no, in terms of procurement, I haven't seen a particular trend in one over another.
I suppose, while BIM can work in different procurement routes, obviously, if you look at countries like Australia and the US, the early engagement of contractors in the project is obviously beneficial, bringing construction knowledge to the design process. So, while the traditional design, tender, build process BIM can work, I think what you're seeing in those countries is more collaborative type of procurements like IPD and alliancing and partnering and that kind of procurement route, which sort of brings more benefit, brings more of the construction knowledge into the design process.
Just one last point in relation to that. I think we've all seen that graphic of information being thrown over a wall. There's still too much of that going on in this country when it comes to design and builds. Like on design and build contracts we've worked on, even if we knew they were derived from a BIM in the first instance, it was never given on to us. We have to almost start again. So I think when you start kind of fragmenting it like that, it makes it more challenging to deliver it. And unlike the UK, we get like 6 days to go from contract award to site. They might get 6 months as well. So that's also extremely challenging. So, there's huge challenges there. I think the more trusting people become with the models, with the protocol, and they're not afraid to pass information on and let people leverage it, life might become a bit easier. It's as hard now as it's ever going to be, I would suggest as well.
Okay, we have one here. Yep.
I was wondering if the panel talk a little bit about the relationship between the EIRs and the plain language questions, and maybe developing EIRs with clients that aren't BIM savvy.
Start?
Yeah, the simple term, the EIR is the client asking, what information do I need to answer a question which will help me decide to go on to the next stage. So that's what the plain language questions are. Once you've decided what is it that I need to know, then what information do the team need to deliver to answer that question? So what the UK government has done is
developed a whole long list of questions that you can use. And not all of them are applicable to every project, but it's a good starting point. So you go through the questions and say, well, for each stage, like, is that important to me? That's a plain language question. Now, what information do I need to answer that question? And that becomes your information requirement. So it's a pretty simple process if you think about it.
Yeah.
But definitely that's where, when you're starting to write an EIR, that's where you would start. Is what do I need to know at this stage? What do I need to know at the next stage?
Answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know what percentage of our clients at the moment produce EIRs or give you EIRs, and then what actions do you take for the clients that don't?
Well, in the main, I would say in projects that we're working on in the UK, the word retrospective is coming up quite a bit. So retrospective EIR, clients hoping that we can, that they will be able to advertise that they're at BIM level 2. So there may be a BEP in place and maybe even an LOMD level of detail and so on and so forth. But again, it's very difficult to go back, and it'll never be truly BIM level 2, even if it's done retrospectively. But it may well help them get to where they need to go ultimately.
You know well, Robert, that the answer to that question is 0. But the action that's taken is no action, because at the end of the day we find that a lot of the employer's information requirements exist in other document forms, which is actually okay. The stuff we want to know is being delivered to us in another contract type or some kind of negotiation document, whatever the case might be. So it's there. You might go through the painful process of trying to pick bits of information out and stick them into a standard format. But I think if you know what you're looking for, we're going to find it anyway. I think it's quite interesting that there are some organisations trying to retrospectively produce them. Fair enough. But I think it'll be great when the day comes when we're actually handed one from the off. You'll hear that opening fanfare from 2001: A Space Odyssey, there from Kill. It will be tremendous. But to be fair, we're a long way away from that at the moment, I honestly feel, but it should be no surprise to see that.
I think it's about advising the clients as well, Mike. If the client's asking for BIM, like I said in my presentation, that clients talking about it or you think it could provide value to the client, you should be bringing it up and advising them. So if they're talking about BIM, the first thing you should be saying is, have you got an EIR document? If the answer's no, then...
It's not OIR comes first.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, if they want to do it at that level, but at the moment, I think a lot of clients are just doing it at project level and starting with the EIR. But yeah, I'd love them to have an OIR and an AIR. But if we can get the EIR right to start with, that would be great. So I think a lot of projects we work on, as soon as we're involved and the acceptance of BIM, that's the first thing we ask: where's the EIR? Who's doing the BIM execution plan? Who's managing this process through? So I think you need to ask that question. I think from a client's perspective, what you're able to do is develop a set of standard BIM protocols, that EIR document, a BIM template, your capability assessment, and that can then just be used on each of your projects going forward, particularly if you have a large asset portfolio and projects coming off or on a framework, that you can just create those standards. We've worked with a number of our clients, particularly in higher education, where we've created standards for them and they now just use that on each of their projects. They invest in it once and then it's there for all projects going forward. So I always say ask the questions.
I mean, we're actually doing a lot of retrospective EIRs, and
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that really, because I mean, projects may have got started and people are catching up. Industry, this is new to industry, and to be honest, until people start employing this stuff on projects, it's just going to be theory. So, if you're in a project and you're in design stage and everybody's keen to do BIM, you might as well sit down and sort of formulate how, as a team, you're going to do BIM with the client. And it's all about educate the client. So it might be a retrospective EIR, but when that project goes to tender, you can, from tender stage on, at least the people tendering know what they're tendering on.
you know, and the construction team has a requirement then to take them forward into the construction stage. So I don't think personally that there's anything wrong with the retrospective EIR. It's not the ideal, but it's still better than nothing. I mean, it's better than having no EIR.
Okay, move on down there.
Yeah, just a question. I suppose nobody in here sees a problem with the concept of level 2 BIM. The issue is maybe there's a reluctancy, especially I suppose in the small to medium, to invest in the training or the change in management and structures, and you have people saying, oh, we sent the man to move 69, but they can't deliver. Why do we need all this extra technology? Does there need to be an Irish BIM mandate similar to the UK? Because we tend not to do stuff for our own good to go into our head in this country anyway, you know? What do you think?
Back on the soap. Yeah, he's back in the soapbox.
Well, before I talk about the BIM mandate, I mean, I think people need to grow up, like about this thing about training and investing in process. I mean, going back to the thing, we're wasting 30%, you know, of the cost of construction on poor practices. You know, so people are wasting money every day in their business, whether you're an architect or an engineer or a contractor. You know, spending a little bit of money on some software and some training and investing in your people would be less than 0.5% of the contract value. You know, so why plug away at an already wasteful process just to save 0.5%? Because you don't want to invest in your people, invest in your training. I think this industry is really shocking in the way it works with people. Like in other industries, if you're working in IT or anything, you get trained to do the job you do. People invest they give you the right equipment to do the job you do properly. We really have to, as an industry, as a company, as an individual, you have to really think about this investment cost. But going back to the mandate, does the Irish government need a mandate? I would say at this stage, probably not. I think people are getting on with it. Definitely companies that are working have a bigger view, like working outside of Ireland, realize that this is the way things are going and they're just going to get on with it. One negative thing about a mandate is that people look at it as a regulation or something, what's the minimum I could do to sort of meet this requirement? And whereas if people are looking at BIM properly, say what's the maximum I could do to leverage this process? But yeah, they would eventually catch up, I think.
I would just point out as well, Mike, that BIM level 2 in the UK is only mandated on centrally funded government projects, so like MOD, MOJ projects. It doesn't influence local authorities, councils and other people or the private sector. It's purely centrally funded. However, our experience has been, and when that mandate was published back in May 2011, our experience at Turner & Townsend was actually it was our private sector clients who were coming to us saying we want to find out more, we understand, we think this could drive a value and efficiency, particularly during operations, the focus was. And it was those who kick-started it for us, particularly in the UK, and then the public sector kind of dragged behind a little bit, waiting for obviously the government to probably push them a little bit more. But yeah, just so you're aware, it is only centrally funded government projects, but what we're now finding is, particularly in the past 6 or 8 months in the UK, our local authorities, councils are the ones who are now contacting us, because I think the government will start pushing at that level within the country.
I'm just conscious of time, so maybe if there's one or two more questions, and then maybe we'll all be available to take some questions after.
Just for Anna there, I suppose, have you come across EIRs, that have requirements for cost information in models, and I suppose how effective that has been, and given the difficulties spoke about in terms of interrogation and validation of models, and the difficulties of extraction of quantities that can occur?
Yeah, not for cost information to be included in the models, we wouldn't expect that, but we would expect the right data and geometry to be in the models. So within the EIR, the BIM uses that we identify, whether that's coordination, sequencing, asset management, we ensure that cost estimation and cost management is identified in the EIR as a BIM use. So the outcome is that we're able to get quantification and use the models to support our service offering, the development of estimates, cost plans, bills. And so we don't expect to see cost information in. And we don't put cost information back in either. We obviously just take the models, like most with the likes of software like Costex or Causeways Bin Measure, and extract the data from the quants. The problem we have at the moment is sometimes the quality of the models where the information's not there, and that's why we're having to communicate really what we want to the designers and the level of detail we expect to see in the model as well.
Okay, yeah, last one, is that okay?
What's the best case study for an Irish project showing cost benefit analysis of implementing the BIM on a project? Or is there one?
There is none.
I asked this question about 3 years ago as well.
No, there is none.
Not an Irish project,
No.
I would say.
And the best one,
It'd be great if it was. That's all
the best one, you won't hear about it anyway, because it's too IP restricted, so unfortunately.